And we're still talking about a story that is currently still developing, and it broke yesterday with no warning, and it caught Manchester City off guard and the rest of us as well, as the consequences continue to be discussed. The Premier League has referred Manchester City to an independent commission over more than 100 alleged breaches of finance rules since the club were acquired by the Abu Dhabi-based City Football Group. The club are also charged with failing to cooperate with and assist the Premier League in its investigation, which was launched in December 2018. City are alleged to have breached rules relating to the provision of accurate financial information, in particular with respect to its revenue, including sponsorship, its related parties, and its operating costs, the league said. The club were fined 30 million euros by UEFA, which CAS reduced to 10 million euros. In addition to the charges relating to the club's revenue and operating costs, City are also alleged to have not fully disclosed managerial remunerations from the 2009-2010 to 2012-2013 seasons when Roberto Mancini was manager. I am joined, of course, on the line by Wale Agbede, my colleague, and all of this is worth examining as to the potential consequences that lie in wait for Manchester City and indeed the entire league, as well as the potential damage to the reputation of the league. Wale, good morning.
Yeah, good morning. Thanks for having me on the show.
All right. Now, Man City have for the longest time spent money at such a pace that they've been the envy of the league. And it's no surprise that they've been favorites for the league title for almost like 10 years now. Every single season they're up there, especially since Pep Guardiola came into the team. But now, all those suspicions that have been held against them for about the way they spend, about some illegitimate practices, some breaches of rules are now being brought up again. Just a couple of years ago, UEFA charged them, but the case was thrown out because CAS deemed that the evidence was collected at a time-barred period. There's a 5-year period between when the rules are broken and when they can be charged. And unfortunately, the time elapsed for UEFA. This is not the case with the Premier League situation. What do you make of what this might do to Man City's season? Not just in the event that they do, that is the Premier League, do potentially levy a points deduction punishment against them. But even if they don't, even if that is delayed until next season, what are the potential ramifications for this season?
All right. So first of all, I'll just take some of the things you said chronologically, right? I don't think that money buys titles because if money buys titles, then maybe for the next few seasons, Chelsea should be favorite, and I don't think that they will be. Right. I think that, this is a case that has been overflogged. I understand that the Premier League have, tried to paint it like, well, it's a new case, but this is exactly the case they had with UEFA. And the UEFA team struggled, failed to, apart from the fact that, some of the evidences were time-barred, they failed to actually prove that Manchester City committed any irregularities. Eventually, the fine that City had to pay was linked to the fact that for some period City were not cooperating with the UEFA investigators, and City were happy to pay the fine. And of course, if it is down to cooperation, it is not going to have as much effect as has been touted in the media with the likes of point deductions, and some have suggested that it could be expelled from the league. Now, but generally, do I feel like City might have walked their books a number of times? Probably, right? But my general feeling is that this is something that a lot of top corporations do. even away from football, and especially in football.
Yeah.
Right? So my general feeling with regards to the financial fair play from UEFA, from the Premier League, has always been that it is targeted at some clubs, like Chelsea, like Manchester City,
Paris Saint-Germain.
establishment clubs. What do you say?
Paris Saint-Germain.
Yeah, fair enough, because these are clubs who are not necessarily establishment clubs, right? But are achieving a lot of success at the detriment of these establishment clubs, right? So and if you go into the history of these establishment clubs, like Bayern Munich, like Manchester United, right? You see many of these irregularities in their history. Now, that is not to say that clubs like City and Chelsea should commit irregularities, but I just think that this whole media frenzy about the story that broke yesterday, it will die down soon. They'll go to court and critically, sorry, Mukai, to answer your question critically about the ramifications it might have. I don't think that it will have any dire consequences, and I'll tell you why. Because an expulsion from Manchester City or a points deduction from Manchester City is going to taint the image of the Premier League, and we know how highly the Premier League holds itself in terms of its image, in terms of its prestige, right? To say that the club that have been the face of the league for the past decade will be expelled from the league, right? I think it's going to paint a really bad picture.
To that point, there's been talk about, rumors more like, that the government is planning to establish a regulatory board, given the happenings that took place last season. Some of its mandate would be to verify and vet the legitimacy of the wealth of those who are purporting to own or purchase football clubs, as well as regulate the excesses of how the football clubs operate within the Premier League. And now some people are saying that this recent development is this Premier League announcement is geared towards proving to the government that the Premier League can handle its own business. What do you say to that?
Well, the Premier League, the government, I mean, they are all in the same political bed, because just last season, right, after the Saudi Arabia Investment Group had been denied access to buy Newcastle, all of a sudden they turned around, right? We understand with all of the political undertones in terms of the relationship between the United Kingdom and the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. They turned around and allowed, Mike Ashley sell the club to the Saudi Arabia Investment Group. So, look, I don't think that Premier League are trying to prove anything to the government. I think that they are all in the same bed, right, in terms of the politics of the football. And even the regulatory body that has been mooted, right, to say we're going to be watching out for, how these people make their money. They can't stop states from owning clubs. I mean, that would be a stretch. You can't stop it.
All right.
For instance, Roman Abramovich, in as much as there has been links to his funds being, state-backed in terms of his businesses, he wasn't a member of the Russian government, right? Roman Abramovich. So how would that body have stopped Roman Abramovich from buying Chelsea in 2003, for instance? So again, I mean, I think that it is all politics, and to answer your question, the Premier League and the government, they are all. Well,
speaking of it all being politics, you've talked about the fact that it is felt that financial fair play rules are geared towards curbing the excesses of non-establishment clubs. But when it comes to law and the practice of it, even in football, every action, every decision taken by these governing bodies sets a precedent. And if, while you say that the Premier League will not want to damage or taint the reputation that they hold so dear, if they do not stand their ground against Manchester City now, they might end up setting a precedent that will leave open the gates for other clubs, particularly the establishment clubs, who then may be able to say, you know what, if the non-establishment clubs can do this and we have more political capital at our disposal, why shouldn't we? Why shouldn't the likes of Manchester United, even though they are close to incurring unbelievable debts to the degree that they might end up in the same boat as Barcelona, how would the Premier League prevent that if they don't hold Manchester City accountable now and deduct points or expel them and set an example?
I think it would be foolhardy for anybody to think that these clubs are not cooking their books already.
I know, I
If
understand that.
and if anybody suggests that they need a precedent, right, in order to deter other teams from doing it, then that's a joke, because I strongly believe that these clubs are cooking their books already. For instance, I can't remember the name exactly, but there's a South Korean betting company that is a partner with Manchester United. Every year, according to their books, that company brings in almost £100 million. If you go to the website of that company, it is non-existent as we speak, right? So and these are similar to some of the things that have been linked with Manchester City. I mean, in City's case, in fact, most of the companies that are attached to them are valid companies. The issue with them is these are companies that are also owned by the Emirati group. So it means that they're just spending money around from Emirates Airline to Abu Dhabi and all of that, and then moving the money around back into Manchester City books, and vis-a-vis, whatever it is, to do whatever it is that they want to do to keep them in the black, right?
Yeah.
But if anybody thinks that City have to be a precedence, or maybe Chelsea in the future, or maybe Newcastle in the future, if nobody has to be a precedence, I personally think that there is a conscious and deliberate intention to curb City, right? And Chelsea in previous years, right? And I think that they're coming for Chelsea soon. And that, because again, nobody can prove to me, nobody can suggest to me that clubs that are run on multi-billion pounds platform are not cooking their books. I disagree.
All right. Now let me read some facts. League rules state that charges such as the ones Manchester City are facing could, if proved, result in a club being expelled from the Premier League, and in the worst case scenario, offending clubs may alternately be deducted points, fined, or reprimanded in other ways. The charges stem from a Premier League investigation into City's financial dealings launched 4 years ago after the release of a trench of Football Leaks documents obtained by the German publication Der Spiegel. City were subsequently banned from the Champions League by European governing body UEFA for 2 years, but successfully appealed to the Court of Arbitration for Sports, CAS. In the unlikely event that the Premier League do go ahead and levy a heavy punishment against Manchester City, maybe 15 points deduction, or even an expulsion to the championship, do you see a Pep Guardiola staying, any of the current first 11 staying, and with the potential of another punishment such as a transfer ban being levied against them? What is the path back into the Premier League for Manchester City?
All right. So I'll just use the instance of Juventus that we've seen before. When Juventus were sent back into the Serie B, they did keep some of their big players, right? Some of the big players stayed. Buffon stayed at the club. A couple of other players, stayed and tried to help them, get back into the Serie A. So yes, I would like to. I mean, the whole squad can't just leave. That's in the hypothetical event that they get relegated or deducted points. The whole squad will not just leave. There are players who I believe will be committed to the cause, because if they stay in the championship, they most likely come back up. At the first time we try. For me, I don't think that the whole squad is going to leave. Maybe some players will leave. Some players who are probably get financial offers from big financial offers from other clubs. Probably.
Wale? It seems we're struggling
I
to.
think he might stay. He seems like he's really committed to Manchester City. This is the longest time he has spent at any club in his managerial career.
Yeah.
Just the third club, by the way. But it seems like he's quite committed to Manchester City. I think he still has about 3-4 years on his contract, or thereabout. I think 2026. That's when his contract expires. So I would like to assume that he stays. And if he stays, if City are able to make him stay, then I think that a lot of the players will stay.
Well, if they're able to, if the players stay, obviously they will be back in the top division in the first try with Pep Guardiola leading this squad. But in the event that, because let's face it, Manchester City do not scream homegrown, committed players. However, a suggestion has been made that should the Premier League punish Manchester City, it might be the catalyst that pushes the squad in the direction of success, because then they will feel that it's them against the world. Hello, Wale?
Yeah. So with Manchester City, I think that they actually do have some young English players who have been quite good, right?
Yeah.
Phil Foden is a homegrown player. He's in the first team. There's Rico Lewis, who has broken into the first team now. There's Cole Palmer. There's James McCarthy, Joshua Wilson, Brand, the defender. So they actually do have some homegrown players. John Stones is an English player. So I've counted about 6 players who could, walk into the first team if they do suffer this kind of punishment. So, yeah, is the Premier League going to use sending them to the Championship and a transfer ban to make them sign or use homegrown players? That seems like you're using a sledgehammer to kill an ant, right? If that's its intention. And I think it makes no sense. If you want them to use homegrown players, there are rules already. The rule in the Premier League at the moment is that every club must have at least 8 players who have trained in English football for 3 years before they clock the age of 21. Now, 4 of those 8 players must have trained in your own club, right?
Yeah.
Before they clock the age of 21 for at least 3 years. That's the rule right now. So, punishing them, in order to get them to use more English players is basically killing an ant with a sledgehammer.
All right. Now, for final, let's wrap up with, if Man City do have drop points, if that's all the punishment they will be levied against them, what does it do? And I don't mean this season, but what does it do to the power structure of the league for the next couple of seasons? Quickly, Wale.
Well, I think it affects it a lot because you consider that, City have won 4 of the last 5 league titles. They've been favorites in all of those seasons. At the moment, it looks like Arsenal might be breaking that dominance this season. Liverpool have, competed a few years. Chelsea will be hoping to compete, right? If City stay up with the investment that they've made. But basically, just not having a team who, it almost seems like Man City is, they are hovering on the Premier League at the start of every season. It almost seems like everybody has a reference point that they're competing against. So if City do leave that position in terms of point deduction or relegation to the Championship, then it means that the other teams, Manchester United, who seem like they're progressing well under Ten Hag, Chelsea, Arsenal, Liverpool, it means that they will be competing on a more level playing ground in terms of the history, and I think that it might just help some of these teams get more league titles.
All right, Wale, thank you so much for joining us on the show. It's a pleasure having you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much.
Have a good day. And to everyone at home or at work, it's always a pleasure having you join us on Plus Sports on Plus TV Africa. I have been your host, Mikhail Tinubu. Remember, life is never boring with some sports. Have a wonderful day.